I used to think the wiseman story was just a nice Christmas detail. Then I realized they defied a king's direct order to worship Jesus. They changed everything about how I understood worship. I checked my phone first thing in the morning instead of my Bible. I obsessed over career advancement more than Christ's kingdom. I bowed to cultural expectation, political tribes, even entertainment. The wise men had a literal king demanding their loyalty, and they said no because there was a greater king. I spent a lot of time over the past year contemplating Matthew 2, tracing every detail of the wise men's journey. I studied the Greek words for worship, cross referenced Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah king, and examined historical context about Herod's paranoid reign. What I found challenged everything I thought about what worship actually required. Let's look at what the wise men risked just to seek Jesus. Then I'll show you the Greek word for worship that reveals what they actually did when they found him. By the end, you'll see why their final act, defying Herod and going home another way, is the most convicting part of the whole story. But first, let's look at the verse that wrecked. It's one word in Greek that shows us what worship truly costs. We'll start where Matthew started, with the question that launched everything. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? We have come to worship him. These men traveled hundreds of miles, likely from Persia or Babylon, following a star they believed announced the king's birth. This wasn't a casual trip. This was months of dangerous travel through deserts, risking bandits, exhausting resources. And here's what struck me. They didn't have the Bible. They didn't have the New Testament. They had ancient prophecies, astronomical observation, and an unexplainable conviction that this newborn king was worth finding. I had several translations of the entire Bible on my phone, and I couldn't seem to prioritize 15 minutes to seek Jesus. The wise men sought Jesus when it was costly, inconvenient, and uncertain. I avoided seeking Jesus when it conflicted with my doom scroll. We'll get back to that, but first let's talk about what happened when they reached Jerusalem. It reveals the first major obstacle to worship. When the wise men arrive in Jerusalem, they do something that seems innocent but turns out to be dangerous. They ask publicly about a newborn king. This is where it gets tense. Herod the Great was the recognized king of Judea, appointed by Rome, brutally protective of his throne. He'd already murdered multiple family members who he suspected threatened his power. He was paranoid, ruthless, and absolutely not interested in hearing about another king of the Jews. Matthew says Herod was troubled. What an understatement. Their Greek word is heterakte. He was disturbed, agitated, thrown into confusion. This wasn't mild concern. This was rage brewing beneath a controlled surface. So Herod does what manipulative leaders do. He pretends to care about worship. I too may come and worship him. Herod wasn't planning to worship. He was planning to kill. But he used the language of worship to deceive. And this is where the wise men's story became painfully relevant. Because I live in a world of competing Herods, systems, ideologies, leaders, platforms that demand my allegiance while using religious language. Success is how you serve God. Your political tribe is defending Christianity. Entertainment is just harmless rest. They all say, worship here, give your devotion here, but they're lying. And the wise men had to make a choice, which we'll talk about in a moment, but first we need to understand what worship actually looked like when they found Jesus. So the wise men leave Herod, follow the star, and arrive at the house where Jesus is. What did they do when they arrived? They fell down and worshiped him. Here's the Greek word that stood out to me. Proskuneo. It means to bow down, to prostrate oneself, to kiss toward. A physical act of total submission. When I traced this word through Matthew's gospel, I found something that made me sit back in my chair. Matthew uses this exact word only a few times in his gospel, and every time it's about recognizing Jesus' true identity. The wise men proskuneo Jesus. They physically bow, offering worship, reserved for deity and king. And check this out. The wise men do this when Jesus is a toddler. No miracles yet, no teaching yet, no resurrection yet, just a child in a humble house. And this is what worship actually is. It's not based on what Jesus does for me. It's based on who he is. King, God incarnate, worthy of everything. The wise men brought their best treasures, gold, frankincense, myrrh, expensive and valuable stuff, the kind of gifts you don't get casually. And I had to ask myself, what am I actually offering Jesus? My leftover time? My spare energy? My attention when nothing else is competing for it? The wise men gave their best. I've been giving Jesus my scraps. But here's where the story reaches its climax and where I got absolutely right. After they worship Jesus and offer their gifts, the wise men have a choice. Herod commanded them to report back. Any normal person would comply. He's the king. He has military power. Disobeying means risking execution. They departed to their own country by another way. And this is what I've been missing about worship my entire life. Real worship of Jesus means rejecting competing allegiances, even when it's costly. This is where I got stuck because I kept thinking, but Herod had authority. He was the recognized king. Wasn't disobeying him dangerous? Yes, it was absolutely dangerous. Herod would later slaughter every male child under 2 in Bethlehem trying to kill Jesus. The wise men knew what kind of man they were defying, but they'd seen the true king. And once you've worshiped Jesus, bow down completely, you can't bow to anyone else. And that's when it clicked. Worship isn't just what I do on Sunday morning. Worship is who gets my ultimate allegiance when competing powers demand it. But wait, there's something even deeper here. That praise seems simple, but it's loaded. The wise men didn't just take a different road home. They rejected the world's path entirely. Herod represented the world system. Political power, manipulation, violence disguised as piety. He wanted to use the wise men for his purpose. He wanted them complicit in his plan to destroy the true king. And they said no. Now here's the part that convicted me most deeply. Going another way cost them something. It meant a longer journey home, avoiding Jerusalem, avoiding Herod's territory, taking dangerous alternate routes. It meant potential consequences if Herod ever tracked them down. It meant choosing the harder path because Jesus was worth it. And I realized I've been trying to worship Jesus while still taking Herod's route. I want to follow Jesus, but I don't want to defy cultural expectation. I want to worship Christ, but I don't want to reject the world's demands for my allegiance. I want to give Jesus my treasures, but I don't want it to cost me anything. The wise men teach me that you can't do both. You can't worship Jesus and comply with Herod. You have to choose. So we've seen the wise men's purposeful journey, seeking Jesus when it was costly and uncertain. We've examined the Greek word proskuneo, worship and its complete physical submission. We've watched them defy Herod's command and go home another way. But here's the piece that ties it all together. The one insight that changed how I understand worship entirely. The wise men came to worship. That was the whole point. Not to get something from Jesus, not to use him for their purposes, not to check a religious box. They traveled hundreds of miles, risked everything to fight a king, all for one purpose, to bow down before the true king, offer him their treasures. And this affected me because I've been approaching Jesus back. I come to him for peace, for answers, for blessing, for comfort, all good things. But the wise men came just to worship. And here's why this points us to the gospel's heart. Jesus didn't come to be served. He came to serve and give his life as a ransom. The wise men bowed before a toddler who would grow up to be executed on a Roman cross, the ultimate act of worship rejected by the world. But God raised him from the dead and exalted him to the highest place. And now every knee will bow, every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is. The wise men got it right from the beginning. They saw past Herod's temporary power to the eternal king. They bowed when it cost them something. They went another way because Jesus was worth it. And the gospel calls us to do the same. Reject the world's competing king, bow before Christ alone, and walk the narrow road, even when it's costly. So now, when my phone demands my first attention of the day, I remember the wise men's long journey just to seek Jesus. When my career pressures me to compromise integrity, I remember their defiance of Herod. When I'm tempted to give Jesus my leftovers, I picture them opening their treasures, gold, frankincense, myrrh, and offering their absolute best. Worship costs something, and Jesus is worth it. What Herods demand your allegiance? And what would it look like to go another way? Drop a comment. I read everyone, and I need your perspective. Next week, we'll take a look at the nativity that was happening in the spiritual realm when Jesus was born. You won't want to miss that one. I'm sure folks will have feelings about it, and I'm here to talk it out so we can grow together. Thanks for watching.